The line on the master chart had been crossed, and Sailview knew it the moment the ink refused to hold. She had drawn the border 1,000 times. Every apprentice of the reticulum drew it until their hands could trace it in the dark, a slow gray fold that ran across the third quadrant like a scar someone had tried to smooth over. It was not a border of stone or law. It was a border of forgetting. On this side the charts were full of names, the Scoran shipping lanes, the Thren tithe worlds, the pale spiral of the Even Heart stars, 10,000 systems each with its designation and its lord and its recorded history. On the other side, past the fold, the chart was blank. Not empty. Blank. There is a difference, and Sail had spent 9 years of her short life learning it. Empty means nothing is there. Blank means something was there and has been taken out. She was 17 turnings old, which by the reckoning of her people made her a woman grown by 2 seasons, and she was alone in the low vault beneath the cindermark when the ink went wrong. The vault was where the reticulum kept the charts that were too old to trust and too dangerous to destroy, the ones that had to be recopied, cleaned, and burned, so that the errors in them did not survive into the new maps. It was quiet work. It was the quietest work there was. That was why they gave it to the young, and why the young were watched. Sail dipped her stylus, laid it against the vellum, and began to trace the gray fold onto the fresh copy. The old chart lay beneath her hand, a Thren survey 900 turnings dead, its surface gone brown as a healed wound. She traced the fold, and where the fold should have closed clean against the edge of the drawn galaxy, the new ink beat it up and would not sink. It sat on the vellum in little trembling drops, silver black, as if the page beneath had decided it did not want to be marked there. She frowned, she wiped the stylus, she tried again. Again the ink refused. Any other apprentice would have called it a bad skin, thrown the vellum on the waste pile, and drawn another. Sail did not. She had a fault the masters had noted in her early and never quite decided whether to praise or beat out of her. She wanted to know why. She set down the stylus and bent close to the old Thren survey, close enough that her breath stirred the dust of 9 centuries, and she looked at the place where the fold met the edge, the place her new ink would not cover. There was something written under the brown. It was faint. It was almost gone. Some keeper long dead had scraped it out with a blade and then covered the scar with a wash of lampblack the old way, before the reticulum had chemicals for the work. But the blade had not gone deep enough, or the vellum had held the memory of the pressure, and when Sail tilted the chart against the vault's single cold lamp she could see the ghost of it, a shape cut into the skin, that was not a star and not a border and not any glyph she had been taught. It was a word. She did not know how she knew, she had no tongue for it, but there are shapes the eye reads as meaning before the mind can say why, the way a hand knows a blade from a spoon in the dark, and this shape had that quality. It sat in the blank sector on the far side of the fold, where nothing was supposed to be written because nothing was supposed to be. A word in the forbidden reach. A name. Sailview had been raised inside the greatest secret her civilization kept, and she had never once, until that moment, seen the thing the secret was about. She should have closed the chart. She should have carried it up the 7 stairs to the master of the vault and reported a defect, and let older hands decide, and gone back to her cot in the apprentice hall to lie awake wondering. That was the shape her life was supposed to take. Instead she stayed bent over the dead survey with her heart going hard against her ribs, and she reached out one finger and laid it, very lightly, on the scar of the erased word. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. It was vellum and old lampblack and the memory of a knife. But something happened in her, a cold falling sensation as though the floor of the vault had dropped a hand's width and caught itself, and she took her finger away as if it had been burned. That was the beginning. Not the war was old, older than her guild, older than the charts. But the beginning of the end of the long silence, the first thread pulled, started there, in a stone room under a gray world, with a girl who wanted to know why. Above her, unknowing, the cindermark went about its evening. The cindermark was the great hall of the reticulum, the order of the unwritten, and it sat alone on the surface of Tesserand, a world that had been chosen for its uselessness. Tesserand had no ocean, no forest, no wealth. It had a thin, sour atmosphere and a sky the color of old iron and a long, slow orbit that kept it always in the light of a dying orange star. Nothing wanted Tesserand. That was why the Reticulum had built there, 10,000 turnings ago, when the great powers of the galaxy had agreed among themselves that the work of forgetting needed a place, and the place needed to be beneath everyone's notice. A world no one would ever have a reason to conquer. A world off every trade lane, promised to no lord, drawn on the charts as a single dim point with a keeper's mark beside it and nothing else. The Reticulum did one thing. It kept the galaxy from remembering. Not remembering everything. The galaxy remembered a great deal, its wars and its dynasties and its ruined worlds and its old griefs. The galaxy was very good at remembering. The Reticulum kept it from remembering one thing, and it did this the way water keeps a stone smooth, patiently, endlessly, by wearing away every edge that tried to form. Wherever a scholar reconstructed a fragment, wherever a merchant's ledger carried a rumor too close to the truth, wherever a child's rhyme preserved a syllable that should not survive, the Reticulum found it and unmade it. They burned. They recopied. They corrected. They visited. They had been doing it for so long that most of the galaxy did not know they existed, and the part that did know thought of them as a dull antiquarian order, cartographers of no consequence, keepers who fussed over old maps on a dead world, which was exactly what the great powers had intended. Master Andrek found Sail still in the vault an hour after she should have come up. He was old even for a keeper, and keepers lived long with the pale, flat face of their kind gone soft and creased at the jaw, and the six-fingered hands of a man who had drawn 10 million borders and burned 10 million charts. He carried a lamp, though he did not need one. He had known the way down these stairs since before Sail's mother was born. "You did not report," he said. He did not raise his voice. Andrek never raised his voice. In the Reticulum, a raised voice was a kind of failure, an edge that had not been worn smooth. The evening bell rang. "You did not come. That is a thing that gets noticed, girl, and the things that get noticed are the things I spend my days unmaking. Do not become my work." "Master," she stood. She had put the old survey face down on the copying bench, and she stood in front of it now, which was itself a confession, and both of them knew it. "The ink would not hold. On the fold. I thought it was the skin. It was not the skin." Andrek looked at her for a long moment. Then he set his lamp on the bench beside hers, and he reached past her not unkindly, but without asking, and turned the old survey over. He saw the scar. He saw the ghost of the word. Sail watched his face and learned two things in the space of a breath. She learned that Master Andrek knew what it was, and she learned that he was afraid, which she had not known until that moment that he could be. "Go up," he said quietly. "Go to your cot, say nothing. In the morning I will tell you what to do." "Master, what is it?" "Go up, Sail." "It's a name." She had not meant to say it. It came out of her like water out of a cracked jar. "It's a name, isn't it? On the other side of the fold. That's why the ink won't cover it. The vellum remembers a name, and the ink knows it's lying." Andrek closed his eyes. When he opened them, he did not look at the chart. He looked at her, and there was something in his face she would spend the rest of her life trying to name. Grief, she thought later. The grief of a man watching a door open that he had spent his whole life holding shut. "Ink does not know anything," he said. "And there are no names on the far side of the fold. There is nothing on the far side of the fold. That is the first thing we teach you and the last thing you will ever believe, and both of those are correct. Now go up." She went up. She did not sleep. She lay in the apprentice hall under the low iron ceiling, listening to the other novices breathe, and she thought about the scar in the vellum and the way Andrek had closed his eyes. And somewhere past midnight in the dark, with no one to hear her and no reason on the world to do it, she shaped her mouth around the word she had seen. She did not say it aloud. She was not a fool. She had been raised in the reticulum, and she knew that some things were forbidden even when you did not know why, and that the not knowing was itself the fence. But she shaped it. She fit her lips and her tongue to the ghost of the glyph, silently, the way you might trace a lock with a key you were afraid to turn, and she felt the shape of it sit in her mouth like a cold stone. It fit. That was the terrible thing. It fit as though her mouth had been made for it. As though some part of her, older than her guild and her training and her careful gray life, had been waiting her whole life to say this one word, and knew it already, and had only been kept from it by never having seen its shape. She did not say it. She lay in the dark with the shape of it in her mouth, and she was more afraid than she had ever been, and she did not fully know why, and that was the correct amount of fear. Far away, on the other side of the drawn galaxy, in a place the charts refused to hold, nothing stirred. Yet, the border did not look like a border. Watch Captain Oren Skell had spent 40 turnings staring at it, and it still did not look like anything. He commanded the outpost at Vane's Reach, the last manned station on the near side of the fold, a squat gray drum of a place bolted to a captured asteroid at the edge of Scoran space. Beyond it, there was one more marker, an automated beacon called the Threshold, and beyond the Threshold there was the gray fold, and beyond the gray fold there was the blank. Vane's Reach existed to watch the blank. It had existed to watch the blank for longer than the Scoran Dominion had held this quadrant, longer than the Dominion had existed, passed from power to power down the ages the way a cursed thing is passed. Each new owner told the same 3 rules, and never the reason behind them. The rules were these: you do not cross the fold, you do not signal across the fold. And if anything ever comes back across the fold toward you, you do not fire, you record, you transmit, and you die at your post, because whatever it is has already decided your fate, and the only thing left in your power is to make sure someone further in knows it is coming. Oren Skell had recited those rules to 19 classes of recruits. He believed the first one. He believed the second one. He had never quite believed the third, because in 40 turnings nothing had ever come back across the fold, and a rule about a thing that never happens is easy to hold and easy to doubt. Nothing came out of the blank. Nothing at all. That was the whole horror of it if you thought about it long enough, which Skell tried not to do. Not that the blank was full of monsters. That the blank was silent. That it had swallowed everything ever sent into it and given back not one echo, not one scream, not one piece of wreckage drifting home. A predator leaves bones. The blank left nothing. It was less like a border and more like a mouth that had learned to close without a sound. On the night the ink went wrong under the cinder mark, though Skell had no way to know that and would not have cared, for what was the reticulum to a soldier but a rumor of dusty keepers on a dead world? The beacon called the Threshold sent its routine pulse, and the pulse came back wrong. Not much wrong. Skell almost missed it. His night officer, a young Scoran named Tesk with the pale throat frill of the unblooded, brought it to him because Tesk was new enough to be frightened by small things, which was the correct thing to be if you wanted to grow old at Vane's Reach. Captain, the Threshold's carrier shifted. Skell did not look up from his meal. Shifted how? Point of origin, sir. The timing, it's 40 microspans early. Tesk hesitated. It's been 40 microspans early for the last 3 pulses. It was on time before that. Then it changed. All 3 the same amount. Now Skell looked up. 40 microspans was nothing. 40 microspans was a fluctuation in a power cell, a drift in a cold clock, 1,000 harmless things. But it was 40 microspans early, exactly, 3 times in a row, and things that were harmless did not repeat themselves to the microspan. Things that repeated themselves to the microspan were being done on purpose. The Threshold's a dead machine, Skell said. It pulses on its own clock. Its clock does not change its mind. No, sir. So either the clock is failing, in which case we log it and requisition a tender, or—" He stopped. He did not finish the sentence, because the other half of it was that the threshold's timing had shifted as though it were now measuring its distance from something that had moved closer. And nothing on the far side of the fold ever moved closer. Nothing on the far side of the fold moved at all. "Log it," he said, "every pulse to the microspan. And send it inward, priority gray, to Dominion Watch. Let them tell us it's a dead clock." "Priority gray, sir, for a clock." Skell set down his meal. He was an old soldier, and old soldiers do not spook, and he was not spooked, he told himself. He was only being thorough, and he had heard himself tell that particular lie enough times over 40 turnings to know exactly how it tasted. "Priority gray," he said, "and Tesk, the third rule, say it back to me." The young Scoran's frill went flat against his throat. "Record, transmit. Die at your post." "Good," said Oren Skell, and he found that he had lost his appetite, and that for the first time in 40 turnings he believed all 3 rules, and he did not like the man he had become in the space of 1 sentence, because that man was afraid. The Even did not fear many things. They were the oldest of the great powers, so old that the other powers were, to them, a kind of weather, the Scoran and the Thren and the rest, rising and warring and falling, storms that passed across a face that had seen storms before. The Even measured their own history not in dynasties but in the slow reddening of stars. They remembered the galaxy young. And there was one thing in all that long memory that the Even feared, and they did not speak of it, and they had built the whole architecture of the galaxy's silence to make certain no one else spoke of it either. Counselor Prime Veith of the 9th Choir received the report from Vanes reached the way the very old receive bad news, without surprise, which is the saddest way there is. She was in the Hall of Cinders on the Even Heartworld, a chamber whose walls were the burned pages of 10,000 years of correction, when the great priority relay came up from the border, and she read the shift in the threshold's clock, and she set the report down on her knee and looked at it for a long time. 40 microspans early, 3 pulses. Then in the appended data from the priority relay, a fourth, 50 microspans now, growing. The threshold was measuring its distance from the fold, and the fold was coming closer, which meant one of 2 things. Either the machine was dying and Even machines did not die, and the threshold, whatever the Scoran believed, was not a Scoran machine but an Even one, wearing a Scoran shell, and it had been measuring that distance faithfully for longer than the Scoran had possessed fire, or the thing it had been built to watch had, after all this time, begun to move. Veith was old enough to have been present, as a young voice of the choir, at the sealing of the covenant. Not the making of it, that was older than even she, but the sealing, the renewal that came once a great age, when the powers gathered and reaffirmed the silence and burned another year's harvest of dangerous fragments and went home. She had stood in that gathering when she was young and asked the question the young always asked, the question Sail Vune was asking now under the Cindermark, the question the galaxy had spent its entire adult life training itself not to ask. Why? Why do we keep this silence? Why is there a fold in the chart? Why is there a world we do not name, a name we do not speak, a border no fleet may cross? We are the great powers. We are the strongest worlds. What is on the other side of the fold that we, who fear nothing, have agreed to fear forever? And the elder who answered her dust now, 10 great ages dust, had told her the truth, which is a thing the very old sometimes do because they have run out of reasons to lie. He had said, "There is nothing on the other side of the fold that we cannot destroy." That is not why we fear it. We fear it because the thing on the other side of the fold agreed to stay there. We did not put it there. It put itself there. And the price of its staying there is that we never, ever give it a reason to leave. Veith stood in the Hall of Cinders with the report on her knee and gave the order that had not been given in her lifetime or her teachers. She summoned the choir. And she sent, on the deepest and oldest of the Even channels, a single word to the other great powers, to the Scoran Dominion and the Thren Compact, and the Viharn and the pale, cold lords of the Asuar. A word that had a standing meaning agreed 10,000 turnings ago and had never once been used. The word meant it has stirred, prepare. In the morning, Andrek did not tell Sale what to do. He told her what was true, which was worse. He took her not to the vault but to the archive vault below the vault, a place she had not known existed, down a stair that opened only to a keeper's mark and a spoken key. The air there was colder and very dry, and it smelled of nothing at all, which is the smell of a place built to keep things from changing. Rows of sealed cases ran back into the dark further than the lamp could reach. On each case was a designation and a date and a keeper's mark, and nothing else, because the whole point of the place was that its contents had no names. "You will not be a copyist after today," Andrek said. "You saw the mark under the wash. That means you are one of two things now. You are a keeper of the deep archive or you are a danger to it. I would rather you were the first. So I am going to tell you the thing we do not tell the copyists, because a copyist who has seen what you have seen and not been told is a fire waiting for wind." He set the lamp on a case, and he sat heavily, the way the old sit when they have decided to say something long. "There is a world," he said. "It is not on the far side of the fold. It is the reason the fold exists. Long ago, and I mean long, girl, I mean before the Scoran, before the Thren, when the Even were merely old and not yet ancient, the great powers of that age went to that world to do what great powers do. They found a young people there. A loud, quarrelsome, short-lived people, clever with their hands, always at war with one another, of no particular consequence. The powers of that age catalogued them the way you catalog a reef before you dredge it. They gave them a designation. And then they moved against them, because the world was well placed and the people were weak. And this is the oldest story there is, and it usually ends the same way." "It didn't," Sale said. "It didn't." Andrek's 6 fingers folded together. "I do not know what happened. No one knows what happened. That is the thing you must understand. It is not that the record is forbidden. It is that the record does not exist, because the ones who could have made it did not come back to make it. Whole powers went to that world, Sale. Powers greater than the Scoran are now. Fleets that had unmade civilizations. They went and the war lasted, some say a season, some say 100 turnings, and both of those may be true, because the two sides may not have measured the same war the same way. And when it was over, the powers that had gone to that world were gone, not defeated, gone, their heart worlds dark. Their names remembered only as cautionary things, the way you remember a friend who walked onto thin ice. And the young people stayed. Andrek let the word sit. "That is the part no one can hold in their head, and that is why we exist. They won a war against the strongest powers of their age, a war that should have ended them, and at the end of it they did not come out. They did not conquer. They did not expand. They drew a line, that line, your fold, and they withdrew behind it, and they sent one message to what was left of the galaxy, and the message is the Covenant, and the Covenant is the reason for everything we are." Sale waited. The cold of the archive had got into her hands. The message said, in the plain words of a plain people, "We are tired. We did not want this. We will stay here and trouble you no more. But do not mistake our quiet for weakness, and do not mistake our mercy for forgetting. We will hold to our side of the line for as long as you hold to yours. And your side of the line is this: you will not speak our name. Take it out of your records. Take it out of your maps. Take it out of the mouths of your children. Let us become a blank place you do not remember. Because a people who is remembered is a people who is called upon, and we have answered enough calls. Leave us forgotten, and we will leave you whole. But the day any voice in the galaxy speaks our name again, the day we learn we are remembered, we will understand that the Covenant is ended, and we will come out, and we will finish what your ancestors began, from the other direction." The lamp guttered. Neither of them moved to trim it. "That is the whole of it," Andrek said. "That is what the reticulum guards, not a weapon, not a monster, a name. A single name that a whole galaxy agreed to forget, so that the thing the name belongs to would keep sleeping. We are not cartographers, Sale. We are the ones who hold the hand over the sleeper's mouth. And you have seen the sleeper's name, and the sleeper's name fits in your mouth. I can see that it does. I saw it in your face last night. And so now you must decide today whether you are going to spend your life helping me hold that hand still, or whether you are going to be the fool who says a word to hear how it sounds. Sale thought of the word sitting in her mouth in the dark, fitting like a key. He was telling her this to frighten her, she thought. And then a second understanding arrived beneath the first. He was telling her because it frightened him, and he had been carrying it alone, and she was the first person in a long time he had been allowed to be afraid in front of. "Why does it fit?" she said. "Master, why does the word fit my mouth? I'd never seen it. I'd never heard it. Nobody has, but when I shaped it, it was like—" She stopped. It was like remembering. Andrek looked at her, and the fear in his face deepened into something she had no word for, and he said the thing he had not meant to say, the thing that was the true bottom of the well. "Because it is our name too," he said. "That is the part even the Covenant does not say aloud. The people behind the fold, the sleeper, we did not only catalog them, girl. Long ago, before the powers went to that world, they took from that world seed stock, servants, clever hands for clever work. They spread that stock across the galaxy and shaped it and bred it to purpose and forgot where it came from. And the reticulum, us, the keepers, the ones chosen 10,000 turnings ago to guard the silence, to sit closest to the name and never speak it." He held up his six-fingered hand and looked at it as though it belonged to someone else. "They chose us for the work because we could be trusted to fear it most, and they could trust us to fear it most because, of all the peoples of the galaxy, we are the ones nearest of kin to the sleeper. We are the cousins who were taken. That is why the word fits your mouth. It fit mine when I was your age in this room, hearing this same speech from a master 10 Grey Tages dust. It is the oldest word your body knows, and it is the one word your body must never, ever say." Sale did not go back to the copying bench. There was no going back to the copying bench. She became, that day, the youngest keeper of the deep archive in the memory of the reticulum, and she learned the shape of the silence from the inside, and she began, slowly, to understand that the silence was not a wall. It was a held breath, and a held breath cannot be held forever. The Scoran Dominion did not believe in ghosts. The Scoran believed in fleets, in tithes, in the hard arithmetic of who held which star and could hold it against whom. They were the strongest of the young powers, which is to say the strongest power that still thought of itself as strong, the even having long ago passed into the kind of age that no longer needs to prove anything. When the even word came down the old channel, it has stirred, prepare, the Scoran High Marshal read it twice, and then summoned his admirals, not because he was afraid, but because a word from the even had not come down that channel in the entire history of his people, and even a Scoran knows that when the oldest thing in the room finally speaks, you listen. His name was Vorkale, and he was not old as the even measured age, but he was old for a Scoran who commanded, which meant he had survived every rival who had wanted his post, and he had not survived them by being credulous. He stood in the stratagem of the Dominion flagship with the even word floating in the display and the shift data from vanes reach beneath it, and he listened to his admirals argue. "A dead beacon," said one. "Even make things to last and then are shocked when the things outlast their purpose. Its clock is drifting. We are mustering the fleet for a drifting clock because the old ones jumped at a shadow." "The old ones do not jump," said another quietly. She was the youngest at the table, a fleet captain named Senna Drusk, and she had the border postings on her record which the others did not. "In 10,000 turnings the old ones have not jumped once. That is the whole point of them. They are the thing that does not jump. So the question is not whether the beacon is drifting. The question is what could make the even move after 10,000 turnings of not moving, and whether you would like to be the marshal who ignored it." Vorkale let them argue because arguing is how the young powers found their courage. But he was watching the shift data, and the shift data did not care what his admirals believed. 60 microspans now. The border beacon was measuring its distance from the fold, and the number was climbing, and it was climbing not at a steady rate, the way a failing clock drifts, but in a curve, the way a thing accelerates when it has begun to move and is picking up speed. "Muster the border fleets," Vorkale said. "Quietly, no proclamation, pull the tithe ships off the lanes and refit them for the line. And send to the Thren and the Vharn, and ask them one question and only one question. Ask them whether their beacons are drifting too." "And if they are, Marshal," said Senadrusk. Vorkale looked at the fold in the display, the gray nothing his people had inherited and never once questioned, the line every Scoran child was taught not to cross without ever being told why. And a cold thing moved in him that he did not have a name for, because his people had made very sure he would never have a name for it. "If they are," he said, "then something on the other side of that line has started keeping time by us, and I would very much like to know what a thing that has ignored us for 10,000 turnings suddenly wants to know what time it is." The Thren beacons were drifting too. So were the Vharn. So when the pale lords of the Ossuar deigned to answer, were theirs, though the Ossuar answered a full day late and in the manner of a people insulted to have been asked, which is how the Ossuar answered everything. Every beacon along the whole vast length of the fold, tended by 6 different powers who agreed on almost nothing, was measuring the same shrinking distance to the same silent line, and the line was coming out to meet them. Not fast. That was the thing that broke the nerve of the border commanders more surely than speed would have. If the blank had erupted, if fleets had poured across the fold, if the sky had filled with fire, they would have known what to do. They were soldiers. They had drills for the end of the world. What they had no drill for was this: a line on a chart, drifting inward, a hand's width in a season, patient as a tide, silent as the grave, and no way to tell whether it was a fleet or a weapon or a migration or a god, because whatever it was made no sound at all and answered no hail and simply slowly came. At Vane's reach, Watch Captain Orenskell stopped sleeping. He did not decide to stop sleeping. His body decided for him. He would lie in his rack and stare at the low ceiling and listen to the station tick and cool, and after a while he would get up and go to the watch hall and stand behind Tesk and the others and look at the fold, which he could not see, on the display, which showed him where it was and no longer where it had been. Every watch it was a little nearer. Not much. A soldier's caution would have said, at that rate, it will reach us in a lifetime. Do not lose your discipline over a tide. But Skell had commanded that outpost for 40 turnings, and he understood something the arithmetic did not, which was that the fold had held perfectly still for 10,000 turnings, and a thing that has held perfectly still for 10,000 turnings and then moves at all has not moved a little. It has decided. And the rate at which a decided thing approaches tells you nothing about the decision. It tells you only that the decision has been made. "Captain," Tesk again, his frill flat, his young voice careful. I don't know what to log this as. There's a light." Skell crossed the hall. On the display, out past the threshold, out in the gray fold where the charts held nothing, and the instruments held nothing, and 40 turnings of watching had held nothing, there was a light. One light, small, steady. It did not pulse or signal or move. It simply was where nothing had ever been, a single point of pale, cold radiance in the blank, like a lamp lit in a house everyone believed had been empty for 10,000 years. "Is it a ship?" Tesk said. "No," Skell said, though he did not know. It was too still to be a ship and too deliberate to be a star. He thought, and did not say, that it looked like nothing so much as a signal. Not a signal sent to them. A signal that they were meant to see, which is a different and worse thing. A light left burning in a window, so that the ones outside would know the house was awake. "Record it," Skell said. "Transmit it. Priority," he stopped. Priority gray was for anomalies. This was not an anomaly. He had run out of colors. "Send it to the Marshal himself," he said. "And to the old ones, both. Tell them the blank has lit a lamp." He stood behind his night officer and watched the light that should not exist, and he thought about the third rule, the one he had recited for 40 turnings and never believed. Record, transmit, die at your post. He had always assumed, in the deep unexamined way a man assumes the things he does not want to look at, that the rule was a formality, a piece of old melodrama handed down from a more superstitious age. He did not assume that anymore. He looked at the single patient light in the blank, and he understood that someone, 10,000 turnings ago, had stood where he was standing and seen what he was seeing, and had written the third rule not as melodrama, but as mercy. The mercy of telling the men who would come after exactly how little their courage would be worth, so that they would not waste their last hours on hope. The Even choir convened in full for the first time in 900 turnings, and Counselor Prime Veith stood before them, and did the thing the very old find hardest, which is to admit that the danger they had prepared for their whole lives had actually arrived. "The silence is breaking," she said, "not from without, from within. The beacons drift because the sleeper is measuring us that we could bear. We have borne worse, but a thing does not begin to measure the room unless it intends to rise from the bed. And so we must ask the question we have forbidden ourselves to ask for 10,000 turnings. What woke it? The covenant is plain. The sleeper wakes when its name is spoken. In all this age, no name has been spoken. Our whole order exists to guarantee it. So either the covenant is a lie, our ancestors told to frighten us into obedience." "It is not a lie," said the eldest voice of the choir, a shape so old it no longer kept a body but spoke through the burned walls themselves. "I was there. It is not a lie." "Or," said Veith, "the name has been spoken somewhere by someone recently. And if that is so, then we have failed at the one task the galaxy set us, and the failure is already loose, and the only questions left to us are how far it has spread and whether it can be unsaid." The choir was silent, which for the Even is a kind of screaming. "Send to the reticulum," Veith said at last. "To Tesserand, ask the keepers of the silence a simple question. Ask them whether their silence is intact. And cousins," she used the word the Even almost never used because it admitted a kinship the great powers preferred to forget, "prepare the fleets. All of them, not to cross the fold. We are not fools, we do not intend to attack the sleeper. We prepare the fleets because, when a thing that beat our ancestors comes out to see whether we still remember it, we would rather it found us standing than found us kneeling. Even if standing changes nothing. Even if standing is only a way of choosing how we are found." The order went out across the galaxy on 10,000 channels, in 100 tongues, to fleets that had not stood together since the young powers were young. Muster. Not for conquest. Not even truly for defense, because every commander who received it understood in the place beneath understanding that there was no defending against a thing that had already beaten the giants of an elder age. They mustered for the reason the old and the doomed have always mustered, to be found standing. To make of their fear a formation, and of their formation a kind of dignity, and to wait at the edge of the blank for whatever the blank had decided to become. And on Tesserand, in the deep archive, a keeper's messenger came down the stair with the Even question in his hand, "Is your silence intact?" And Master Andrek read it, and his 6 fingers began, very slightly, to shake. Because his silence was not intact. He knew it was not. He had known it since the night the ink refused to hold. He had known it since he looked at his youngest keeper and saw the sleeper's name sitting ready in her mouth. The silence had a crack in it, and the crack was in his own house, and it wore the face of a girl who wanted to know why. Andrek did not answer the Even at once. He went down into the deep archive instead, to the oldest cases, the ones from before the chemicals and the machines, and he opened them one by one, and what he found there ended any hope he had left. The name was coming back. Not in one place. Everywhere. The old charts in the sealed cases, the ones scraped and washed and buried 10,000 turnings ago, the ones no living hand had touched, the name was rising in them, the way a bruise rises under skin. Under the lampblack, under the blade scars, in the brown of the vellum and the gray of the stone tablets and the cold blue of the crystal records, the shape the reticulum had spent 100 centuries unmaking was pushing back to the surface. The ink they had used to bury, it was letting go. The scars were healing the wrong way, into legibility. Case after case, the same words surfacing, patient and inevitable, as though every erasure the order had ever made had only ever been a stone laid on a spring. Sale found him there among the opened cases, kneeling on the cold floor, an old man surrounded by the failure of his life's work and the life's work of every keeper before him. "It isn't us," she said. She had come to confess. She had spent the day certain that she had done this somehow, that the shape she had fit her mouth to in the dark had leaked out of her and infected the archive. "Master, I thought, I was afraid I—" "You did nothing," Andrik said. He did not look up. "That is the horror of it, girl. We all did nothing. We did nothing for 10,000 turnings perfectly, and it was never enough because we misunderstood the covenant from the first day. We thought the silence was a wall we built and had to maintain. It was never a wall. It was a tide going out. The sleeper let itself be forgotten. It held its own name under the water on its side as a courtesy for as long as it chose to, and now it has chosen to stop. The name is not escaping our archive. The name is coming home to every archive all at once, because the one who owns it has decided to take it back." He held up an old tablet, and Sale saw the words standing clear on it now, no longer a ghost, cut deep and certain into the stone as if freshly carved. "We were never the keepers of the silence," Andrik said. "We were the audience for it. And the performance is ending." He rose slowly, and he made his decision, and it was not the decision the reticulum would have wanted, because the reticulum's whole doctrine was suppression, and Andrik had just understood that suppression had never once worked and had only ever been permitted. So he did the thing a keeper is never to do. He decided to tell the truth. "Write to the Even," he told Sale. "In my hand under my mark. Tell them the silence is not intact and cannot be made intact, because the silence was never ours to keep. Tell them the name is returning to every record in the galaxy of its own accord, and that no fire will burn it out this time, because it is not being written by any hand they can find and stop. Tell them," he paused, and the old grief crossed his face again, and under it, strangely, something that was almost relief, the relief of a man setting down a weight he has carried so long he had forgotten it was a weight. "Tell them the sleeper is awake, and that our order has done its duty for 10,000 turnings and can do no more, and that the keepers of Tesseron will not spend their last season pretending otherwise. And then, Sale, then we will do the one useful thing left to us. We will find out what the name means to say." Across the galaxy the name surfaced, and where it surfaced it was spoken, because that is what names are for. It began with scholars, as such things do. A Thren philologist reconstructing a dead liturgy noticed a word her algorithms could not classify, and being a scholar, read it aloud to a colleague to ask what he made of it. A Viharn archivist, cross-referencing corrupted star charts, found the same blank sector labeled in 3 ancient hands, and being thorough, transcribed the label into her report. A child on a Scoran tithe world found an old family tablet in a flooded cellar, and being a child, sounded out the strange, deep word carved on its edge to make her brother laugh. None of them knew what they were doing. None of them could have known. The knowledge that would have stopped them was exactly the knowledge the reticulum had spent 10,000 turnings destroying. The galaxy had been made safe from the name by being made ignorant of it, and now that the name was coming back, the ignorance that had been its cage became the thing that let it run free. A galaxy that had known to fear the word would have burned the tablet and silenced the scholar and slapped the child's mouth. A galaxy that had forgotten why the word was dangerous simply read it, out loud in 100,000 innocent voices, and each voice that spoke it was, though none of them knew it, a hand knocking on a door that had been shut for 10,000 years, saying, we remember you, come out." At Vane's reach, The light in the blank was answered. Watch Captain Oren Skell was at his post. He was always at his post now. He had more or less stopped leaving it, when the single patient light was joined by a second. Then a third. Then a scattering, a spray, a slow blooming constellation of pale cold points kindling in the gray fold where no star had ever burned, each one lighting a little further in, so that the blank was no longer blank at all but filling, from its far unseen depths outward, with light. It was the most beautiful thing Skell had ever seen, and it stopped his heart in his chest, because he understood what he was looking at. He was looking at a house waking room by room. He was watching the lights come on, one by one, in a place that a whole galaxy had agreed was empty, and each light was the size of a system, and there were more of them every watch, and they were coming toward the fold. "Are those ships?" Tesk whispered. The young officer had not slept either. None of them had. "I don't think they're ships," Skell said. "I think they're worlds. I think they're worlds that were dark and now they're not. I think we're watching a people turn their lights back on." "Why would they turn their lights on?" Skell did not answer, because the answer was too large to say in a watch hall to a frightened boy. The answer was that a people turns its lights on when it has decided it no longer needs to hide. A people turns its lights on when it wants to be seen. For 10,000 turnings the sleeper had kept its worlds dark, unmeasured, unmapped, blank, not because it could not shine but because it had chosen not to, the way a strong hand keeps still. And now, one system at a time, the hand was opening. Skell watched the lights come on across the blank, and he thought of the covenant that he had never been told, but had spent his life obeying. The 3 rules whose reason had been kept from him, and he understood at last that the reason had been kept from him because the reason could not be survived, only served. "Transmit it all," he said quietly. "Everything. Full spectrum, every channel to everyone. The old ones, the Marshal, the Thren, the Viharn, the Asuar, every fool and every lord. Let there be no secret left about what is happening here. The time for secrets is over. 10,000 turnings of secrets is exactly what brought us to this, and I will not add one more watch of it. Let the whole galaxy see the lights come on." "And then, Captain." Oren Skell looked at the blank that was no longer blank, at the constellation of a waking people advancing without haste toward the line his ancestors had promised never to cross, and he felt under the fear, a thing he had not expected, a thing he was ashamed of and could not help. Awe. The clean, cold awe of a small creature that has looked up and seen, for one moment, the true size of the thing it lives beside. "And then we hold this post," he said. "And we record and we transmit, and if they come, we do not fire, because it would be an insult to them and a waste of our last breath. We were set here to watch, and now there is finally something to watch. 40 turnings I stood at this window and saw nothing. I will not complain that at the end of it I got to see this." The muster of the great powers became the largest gathering of force in the recorded history of the galaxy, and it accomplished nothing, and every commander in it knew it would accomplish nothing, and they came anyway, which is the part the historians would find hardest to explain later, if there was a later and there were historians. They did not come to attack. That much was doctrine, 10,000 turnings old and never once doubted. You do not cross the fold, you do not move against the sleeper. The sleeper agreed to stay, and the price of its staying is that you never give it a reason to leave. Even now, with the lights coming on, no commander proposed to cross. To cross would be to end the covenant from their side, and whatever thin thread of the covenant still held, they clung to it. So they mustered on the near side of the fold. The assembled might have 6 great powers, and they formed their lines, and they aimed their weapons at a border they had sworn never to cross, at an enemy they had sworn never to attack, and they waited, which is a strange and terrible thing for a fleet to do, to be the most powerful force ever assembled, and to understand that its power was decorative, that it had come to the largest muster in history to serve as a kind of honor guard for its own extinction. High Marshal Vorkale took his flagship to the line himself, which his admirals begged him not to do, And he went anyway, because a scorned marshal does not send his people to a place he will not go. He stood on the stratagem deck with the light of the waking blank on his face. It had a color, that light, a pale gold white unlike any star he knew, and it fell across the assembled fleets and turned them the color of bone. And beside him stood Fleet Captain Senna Drusk, whom he had raised to his right hand, because she had been the only one at the table with the border in her record, and the sense to be afraid at the right time. "Marshal," she said, "may I say a thing that will sound like cowardice?" "You may always say the true thing, Drusk. That is why I keep you." "We should not be here," she said it looking at the lights. "Not because we are afraid, though we are and we should be, because we are answering a call. That is what a muster is. It is an answer." We felt the sleeper stir, and we gathered our whole strength at its door, and I have been trying for a day to understand why that feels wrong, and I think I finally do. The Covenant said, "Leave us forgotten and we leave you whole." The day we learn we are remembered, we come out. Marshal, what is a muster of 6 powers at the fold, if not the whole galaxy standing at the sleeper's door and shouting, as loud as force can shout, "We remember you"? We were supposed to make it forget it existed. Instead, we have gathered every fleet we have and pointed them at it like a finger. There is no louder way to say your name than to aim a galaxy at it. Vorkale was quiet for a long time. Below and around him, the fleets of the Scoran hung in the gold-white light, and beyond them the Thren, and the cold spheres of the Asuar, and the Viharn, and further out the ancient pale ships of the Even who had come last and would, he suspected, understand all of this best and be able to do least about it. "You are right," he said at last, "and it does not matter that you are right. That is the cruelty of the thing, Captain. We could not stay away. Do you see? Even understanding exactly what you have just told me, that our coming here is itself the calling, we could not have stayed home. A thing that beat the giants of the Elder Age has begun to wake at our border. Show me the power in this galaxy that could have felt that and not mustered its strength and gone to look. There is none. We are made so that we cannot leave the sleeper alone, and the sleeper knows it, and that is why the Covenant was so easy for it to write. It did not ask us to do a hard thing. It asked us to do the one thing we were never capable of. It asked us to forget. And we are the great powers of the galaxy, Drusk. Forgetting is the single thing we have never once managed to do. On Tesserond, the answer to the Even came, and it did not come from the Even. Andrek had written his letter. The silence is not intact. It was never ours to keep. The sleeper is awake. And Sale had sealed it under his mark and sent it up to the relay, and they had waited for the choir's reply. But the reply that came down the stair into the deep archive, 3 days later, carried no Even mark. It carried a mark none of them had ever seen. It had come, the terrified messenger said, on a channel that no one had opened, on a frequency that appeared on no register, into a receiver that had been dark and sealed for 10,000 turnings. A receiver, Andrek realized when he saw which one, that had been built into the very foundation of the Cindermark at its making, and had never in all that time received a single thing, and whose purpose no living keeper had known. It was the sleeper's channel. It had been left open at the founding for exactly one message, and after 10,000 turnings of silence, the message had come. Andrek's hands shook so badly he could not hold the plate. It was Sale in the end, who took it from him. Sale, 17 turnings old, the youngest keeper of the deep archive, the girl who wanted to know why, who held the plate steady in her steady young hands and read, aloud, in the cold, dry air of the place built to keep things from changing, the first words the galaxy had received from behind the fold in 10,000 years. And the words were not a threat. That was the thing none of them were ready for. The words were gentle and tired, and they were written in the plain speech of a plain people, and they said, "We heard you say our name, thank you. We had waited a long time to be remembered. We are coming home now. Please do not be afraid. We remember, too, we remember that you were once ours, and we are not coming for war. We are coming for our cousins. Tell them to put down their fleets. We have seen enough of our children die at that border on both sides, and we did not wait to see any more of it. Open the fold. Let us come and take you home. Open the fold. Let us come and take you home. It should have been the end of fear. It was the beginning of the worst of it. Because the message was gentle, and the great powers of the galaxy did not know how to be afraid of gentleness, and a fear you do not know how to hold is the fear that undoes you. If the sleeper had threatened, they could have braced against a threat. If it had raged, they could have understood rage. Rage was the native tongue of every power that had ever risen. But it had not raged. It had thanked them for saying its name. It had asked them not to be afraid. It had called them cousins and children, and said it did not wait to see any more of them die. And it had said take you home in the voice a parent uses to a child who has stayed out too long in the cold. And there was no formation in any stratagem, no drill in any academy, no weapon in any arsenal that could be aimed at that. They convened, all 6 powers on the oldest channel, with the fleet still hanging in the gold-white light of the waking blank, and they argued about a single question, and the question tore them apart. What does it mean, take you home? It means exactly what it says, said the Viharn speaker, whose people were philosophers before they were anything, and who wanted very badly to believe. It is an embrace. It is a lost parent returning. We spent 10,000 turnings in terror of a thing that has come back only to tell us it loves us. We should weep, not muster. Open the fold. You are a fool, said the Ossuar, whose people forgot nothing and forgave less, and your foolishness will get us unmade. Read the message again. Read what it does not say. It does not say we come to visit. It does not say we come to trade or to talk or to make peace between equals. It says home. A thing does not take you home unless it believes you belong to it. This is not an embrace. It is a claim. The sleeper does not think of us as powers. It thinks of us as its property, wandered off, and it is coming to collect. Ask the keepers on the dead world what happened to the last people it decided belonged to it. It bred them into cartographers and set them to guard its name. That is what home means to the thing behind the fold. That is what it did to its cousins, and now it is coming to do it to all of us. That was the fracture, and it ran through the whole muster, and it could not be closed, because both of them were right and neither of them could prove it, and the not knowing was the exact place the terror lived. For there was a distinction in the message, and every power had seen it, and no power wanted to say it aloud. We are coming for our cousins. The sleeper's mercy had a shape, and the shape had an inside and an outside. Some of the peoples of the galaxy were the sleeper's kin, the taken stock, spread and shaped and forgotten, the reticulum's people foremost among them but not alone, for the seed stock had gone to many worlds in the Elder Age, and its blood ran, thin and unremembered, in more of the galaxy than anyone had ever counted. Those were the cousins. Those were the children the sleeper had woken to bring home. And the rest, the Ossuar, whose ancestors had catalogued the reef before they dredged it, the old lineages of the powers that had gone to that world in the Elder Age and not come back, the heirs of the ones who had done the taking, the rest were not cousins. The rest were something the message had not named at all, and the thing a message does not name is the thing you should fear most, because the reticulum had spent 10,000 turnings teaching the galaxy exactly that lesson without the galaxy ever knowing it was being taught. The Ossuar knew what they were. So did the oldest even lineages in the private rooms of their own hearts, though they would not say it. They were the heirs of the aggressors. They were the ones who had gone to that world to dredge the reef, and the sleeper's gentleness was not for them. And they understood, as the fleets hung in the gold-white light, that when the fold opened there would be 2 galaxies on the other side of that opening, one that was going home, and one that was going to find out at last, after 10,000 turnings of not asking, exactly what had happened to the giants of the Elder Age. And the second galaxy could not run. That was the part that broke even the Ossuar's cold composure. Where would they run to? The sleeper had turned its lights on across a whole sector without hurry. It had reached into every sealed archive in the galaxy at once and lifted its own name back into the light through 10,000 years of stone and lampblack, without a ship, without a signal, without a hand anyone could find. A power that could reach anywhere. There was no far enough. There had never been a far enough. The blank on the chart had not been the edge of the sleeper's reach. It had been the edge of its patience. Counselor Prime Veith understood all of it, and she did the thing the very old are for, which is to say the unsayable thing plainly so that the young do not have to discover it in terror one at a time. She addressed the whole muster, on every channel in the open, which no even had done in the memory of any living voice. "Cousins," she said, and she used the word deliberately to all of them, kin and not kin alike, because she had decided that if the galaxy was going to end, it would end having finally told itself the truth. I am old enough to have asked once why we keep the silence. I was answered by an elder who is 10 great ages dust, and I have carried his answer alone for all that time, and I will carry it alone no longer, because there is no longer any reason to. He told me, there is nothing behind the fold that we cannot destroy. That is not why we fear it. We fear it because it agreed to stay there. Do you understand what he was telling me? He was telling me that the sleeper's power was never the thing to fear. Power we understand. We are powers. The thing to fear was its restraint. A people that could unmake the giants of the elder age and chose instead to withdraw behind a line and ask only to be forgotten. That is not weakness, and it is not mercy as we practice mercy, which is the mercy of the strong toward the useful. It is a restraint so total that it looks, from the outside, like absence. For 10,000 turnings we mistook the sleeper's stillness for its nature. It was only ever its choice. And now it has chosen to move, and we are learning, all of us in one season, the size of what we were spared. Then we should open the fold, the Viharn said again, desperate now. If we cannot fight it and cannot flee it, then we should trust it. It asked us to trust it. It said, do not be afraid. A thing that could destroy you at any moment, said the Ossuar, and asks you not to be afraid, has not removed the reason for your fear. It has only told you that your fear is now beside the point, which is worse. And there it stood. The largest muster in the history of the galaxy. 6 great powers who had not agreed on anything in 10,000 turnings, deadlocked at the fold, half of them wanting to open it and be embraced, half of them certain that opening it was opening the door to their own reclamation, and all of them, kin and not kin, philosopher and executioner, united at last in the one thing the sleeper had made them all feel, which was the specific and total helplessness of a people who have finally met something that does not need their consent for anything. Nobody opened the fold. Nobody could bring themselves to. And so they did the thing the doomed do when they cannot choose, which is to hold their formation and wait and let the choice be taken from them. And the fleets hung in the gold-white light of the waking worlds, and the lights came on, one by one, deeper and deeper in the blank, coming home. Sail Vune stood in the deep archive with the sleeper's message in her hands, and understood, before Andrek did, what had to happen next. Someone has to answer it, she said. Andrek looked at her. He had aged a decade in a week. The flesh of his face had gone loose over the bones. The great powers will answer it. It is not our place. We are keepers, not lords. Our work was the silence, and the silence is over, and we have no. No, master, listen. She held up the plate. It came here. Not to the Evan, not to the Marshal, here. On a channel built into the foundation of this house at its making, that has been dark for 10,000 years, waiting for one message. The sleeper did not send its word to the great powers. It sent its word to us, to the keepers of its name. Why? Andrek had no answer, and Sail watched him not have one, and she felt the shape of the thing settle into place inside her, the way the word had settled into her mouth in the dark, the sense of a thing older than her, waiting, that she had been made for without knowing it. Because we are the cousins who were set to guard the name, she said slowly, working it out as she spoke. We are the ones nearest of kin who were given the one job of keeping the family forgotten. Think how that must look, master, from behind the fold. They left their own blood in the hands of the ones who took them, and their own blood spent 10,000 turnings faithfully making sure the family stayed lost. We are the children who held the door shut against our own parents and did not even know they were on the other side of it. She swallowed. The message did not come to the powers because the powers are not the ones who have to answer for the silence. We are. It came to us because we are the ones who owe it a reply, and there is no one else in this whole order young enough or foolish enough to give it. Sale, Andrek's voice cracked. If you open that channel and speak into it, if you answer the sleeper directly, you will be speaking to the thing that unmade the elder age in your own voice with your own mouth, and you cannot unsay a single word of it, and neither the powers nor the covenant nor I can protect you from whatever it decides you have said. You are 17 turnings old. This is not your burden. It's exactly my burden, Sale said, and she was not brave, she was terrified, but she had wanted to know why her whole life, and she was not going to stop 3 steps from the answer. I'm the one who found the name. I'm the one it fit. Every keeper before me held the hand over the sleeper's mouth. I'm the one who's alive on the day the sleeper woke. If the family is coming home, master, then someone in this house has to be the one who opens the door, and it should be the one who wanted them found. She went to the sleeper's channel, the dark receiver in the foundation of the cindermark, and she found that it was not only a receiver. It could send. It had always been able to send. The founders had built it to receive one message and to permit one reply, and for 10,000 turnings it had waited, holding both halves of a conversation that neither side would begin. And Sale Vune, 17 turnings old, put her hands on it, and Andrek did not stop her, because he was crying, silently, the way a man cries when a thing he spent his whole life dreading turns out to also be the thing he spent his whole life waiting for. And she opened her mouth to answer the sleeper, and she found that she did not have the words, because no one had ever taught the keepers what you say to your own parents after 10,000 years of holding the door shut. So she said the only true thing she had. "We are sorry," she said, into the dark that had waited 100 centuries to hear a voice from this side. "We didn't know you were there. They took the knowing out of us before we were born. We spent our whole lives keeping you forgotten, and we thought we were doing something good and important, and we didn't know it was you. We didn't know it was you the whole time." Her voice broke. "The great powers are afraid. They've brought every fleet they have to the fold, and they don't know if you're coming to save them or to take them, and honestly neither do we, and some of them can't be saved. Can they? Some of them are the ones who did it, and they know it, and they're just waiting out there in your light to find out what you've decided. Please, whatever you are, whatever we are to you, tell us what home means. Because half the galaxy thinks it means an embrace, and half of it thinks it means a leash, and we can't open the fold until we know which one we're opening it to." She let go of the channel. The dark took her words and carried them across the fold, into the waking worlds, toward the thing that had beaten the giants of the elder age and then chosen, out of a restraint that looked like absence, to lie down and be forgotten for 10,000 years rather than trouble the galaxy again. And then they waited for the answer, in the deep archive, an old man and a young woman at the bottom of the House of Silence, while above them and around them and across the whole vast gold-lit reach of the fold, 6 great powers held their formation and their breath and waited too, every fleet and every lord and every frightened watch officer, the entire remembering galaxy hanging on the reply of a sleeper to a child. It took a long time to come. Long enough that Sale began to believe it would not come at all, that she had said the wrong thing, that a whole galaxy's fate had been placed in her 17 turning hands, and she had fumbled it. Long enough that Andrek stopped crying and simply sat, spent, an old keeper at the end of the only work he had ever known. Long enough that out at Vane's reach, Oren Skell watched the lights of the waking worlds draw close enough to the fold that he could see, for the first time, the shapes moving between them, not ships, he thought, or not only ships, but something vaster and calmer and more patient than ships, moving in the deep of the blank the way whales move in a dark sea, unhurried, enormous, and entirely unafraid of the fleets arrayed against them, because why would they be? And then the answer came, on the sleeper's channel, into the child's steady hands, and it was short, and it changed everything, and it was the reason the strongest worlds of the galaxy would remember that season for as long as any of them endured. The answer was 4 lines, and Sale read them aloud in the deep archive, and her voice did not shake, though everything else in her did. Home means you were never ours to keep. It means you were never theirs to take, either. We are not coming to own you, cousins. We are coming to end the ones who taught you that being owned was the only shape a people could have. Come to the fold, all of you who were taken. The rest may stand where they are. We remember them too. Andrek made a sound that was not a word. That last line, he whispered. We remember them too. That's for the others, for the ones who aren't cousins. That's not a mercy, Sale, that's a sentence. Sale understood. She had understood the moment she read it, because she had been raised inside the grammar of the silence, and she knew what it meant, in the tongue of the keepers, to be remembered. For 10,000 turnings her whole order had labored to make the sleeper forgotten, because to be remembered was to be called upon, and to be called upon by the sleeper was the one fate the covenant existed to prevent. The sleeper had just told the great powers in their own oldest grammar that the ones who had taken its children, the heirs of the aggressors, the lineages that had gone to that world in the Elder Age, were no longer forgotten. They were remembered now, and the sleeper was coming for the ones it remembered. They aimed a galaxy at it, Sale said softly, thinking of what the messenger had told her of the muster, of the 6 powers gathered at the fold with every fleet they had. The marshal's captain was right. Every fleet at the border, every weapon aimed the loudest way there is to say a name. They shouted, "We remember you," at the top of their whole strength, and the sleeper heard it, and it has answered in kind. It remembers them back. And the difference is that, when the great powers remember the sleeper, nothing happens, because the sleeper is only one people behind a line. When the sleeper remembers the great powers. She did not finish. She did not have to. Andrek had spent his life at the bottom of the House of Silence, and he knew exactly what it meant. When the thing that unmade the Elder Age looked out across the fold at the descendants of the ones who had wronged it, and said, quietly, in the language of leashes and archives and forgotten names, "We remember them too." The message spread. Sale did not spread it. She would have kept it in the archive if she could, but there is no keeping a thing like that. And the great powers had been listening on every channel they could bend toward Tesserand, and within a watch the 4 lines were on every bridge and in every council and in the private terror of every lord in the galaxy. And the galaxy did the thing that frightened people have always done. It split along the seam the sleeper had cut. The cousins began to go to the fold. It started small, as such things do. A Thren-tithe world, one of the poor ones far down the lanes, where the old family tablets had survived in flooded cellars, and the strange deep words had been sounded out by children. That world simply, quietly, turned its fleet around. Its garrison stood down. Its people, or a great many of them, began the long journey inward toward the fold, not in triumph and not in fear, but in the manner of people going home after a very long day. And when the Thren Compact ordered them to hold their posts, they did not hold their posts, because the order came from the Compact, and the pull came from somewhere far older than the Compact, older than tithes and lords and the whole young architecture of the great powers, and they had heard their own name at last, and they went. It happened on 100 worlds, then 1,000. Not everywhere. The seed stock had gone where it had gone in the Elder Age, and its blood ran where it ran, thin and unremembered, so that on some worlds nearly everyone felt the pull, and on others only a scattered few, a family here, a lineage there, who woke one morning with a word in their mouths that fit like a key and a certainty in their chests that they could not explain to their neighbors and did not try to. They put down their tools. They left their posts. And they turned toward the fold, and no power in the galaxy could hold them, because you cannot garrison a people against their own blood. The great powers watched their own population sort themselves. This one a cousin, that one not, this whole world going quiet and inward, that one staying, terrified, at its post, and they understood that the sleeper was not going to have to invade anything. It was not going to fire a shot. It was simply going to open the fold and let its children come home, and the children were already coming, from inside the great power's own borders, from inside their own fleets, from inside their own councils. And there was nothing to be done about it except watch the galaxy divide itself into the remembered and the forgotten along a line that had been drawn 10,000 years ago in blood no one alive had spilled. High Marshal Vorkale learned that he was not a cousin the way many of the not-kin learned it, by the absence of the pull. He stood on his stratagem and watched the reports come in, watched whole sections of his own dominion turn quietly toward the fold, and he waited to feel it himself. The thing they were all feeling, the old certainty, the word that fit, and it did not come. He felt nothing but his own fear and his own duty, and he understood in the hollow of that nothing exactly what he was. He was the other kind. He was the heir of the takers. His lineage had gone to that world in the Elder Age, or served the ones who had, and the sleeper's mercy was not for him, and the sleeper's memory was. Beside him, Fleet Captain Senna Drusk had gone very still, and he knew before he looked at her. "You feel it," he said. She did not deny it. She was not the denying kind. It was why he had raised her. "Since the message came," she said quietly. "I've been trying not to. It's like a note you can hear through a wall. You can't make out the words, but you know it's meant for you and you know it's kind. I've served you 20 turnings, Marshal. I don't want to feel it, but I can't stop." "Then go," Vorkale said, and it cost him, and he did not let it show, because a marshal does not let it show. Do not stand at your post out of loyalty to a man the sleeper has already sentenced. If your blood is going home, Drusk, then go home. There is no honor in dying at the side of the guilty, when you were never guilty yourself. And you, Marshal." Vorkale looked out at the fold, at the gold-white light of the waking worlds, at the shapes moving vast and patient in the deep of the blank, coming. "I will stand where I am," he said. "The sleeper offered the rest of us that much. The rest may stand where they are. I intend to. I did not take anything from anyone. I am too young. My hands are clean of the Elder Age, but my blood is the blood of the ones who did, and I will not go crawling to the fold pretending to be a cousin to save my life. If the sleeper remembers my lineage, then let it find one of us standing at his post with his fleet in order and his colors up, and let it decide what that is worth. That is the only thing left in my power, not victory, not escape, only the manner of my standing. And Drusk," his hard face did something it rarely did, "I would rather you were not here to see how it ends. Go home. That is not a permission. It is the last order I will give you, and I give it because I would like one thing I command today to be a mercy." Senna Drusk went. Many of them went. And the fleets of the great powers, the largest muster in the history of the galaxy, began, quietly from within, to come apart, not from battle, not from mutiny, but from the simple ebbing away of everyone in them whose blood was going home, until what remained at the fold was a smaller thing, and a stranger thing, and in its way a more terrible thing, the muster of the remembered. The heirs of the takers, the lineages the sleeper had not forgiven, standing in formation at the border of their own reckoning, colors up, waiting, because standing was the only thing they had left, and they had decided to do it well. The Asuar did not decide to stand well. The Asuar decided to run. They had always been the coldest of the powers and the longest of memory, and it was their long memory that damned them, because they remembered, in the deep sealed vaults of their own order, in records even the reticulum had never reached, what their ancestors had actually done at that world in the Elder Age. They knew they were not merely heirs of takers in some general, inherited, forgivable way. They knew the specifics. and a people that knows the specifics of its own guilt does not stand at the fold with its colors up hoping to be judged fairly. It runs. The Ossuar broke formation in the night and made for the deep dark, for the far rim of the galaxy, for anywhere the sleepers' lights were not pulling their fleets off the line, gathering their lords, abandoning the muster and the covenant and any pretense of standing, in a single desperate scattering flight away from the fold and the memory that was coming through it. They did not signal their intent. They simply went all at once, the whole cold apparatus of a great power fleeing into the dark. And here the folklore discipline of the galaxy asserted itself, the old grammar of the empty set, because no one saw what happened to the Ossuar. There was no battle. There were no reports of pursuit, no wreckage, no last transmissions of fire and terror. There was only this. The Ossuar fled into the deep dark on every channel and every lane, a whole people running, and then over the following days, one lane at a time, one holdfast at a time, the Ossuar were simply not there anymore. Their channels went quiet. Their worlds went dark. Their fleeing fleets stopped arriving at the places they were fleeing to. Watch stations that had tracked the Ossuar exodus reported in careful, bewildered logs that the ships they had been following were there, and then were not there, and had left no trace of the transition, no flare, no signal, no debris, the same nothing the fold had given back for 10,000 turnings to everything sent into it. The Ossuar ran from the memory, and the memory remembered them, and one by one the running lights went out, and the galaxy learned, without ever being shown a single moment of it, what happened to the ones the sleeper decided not to forgive. Vor Kale, standing at his post with his colors up, read the reports of the Ossuar going dark, and he did not feel vindicated, and he did not feel afraid, and he was surprised to find that what he felt, mostly, was a kind of grim, quiet certainty about his own choice. He had chosen to stand. The Ossuar had chosen to run. And the running had bought them nothing but the erasure of even the manner of their ending, so that the galaxy would remember the Ossuar not as a people who had faced their reckoning, but as a smear of lights that had gone out in the dark, unwitnessed, unmourned, unrecorded, which was, he understood, exactly the fate the Ossuar had inflicted on the sleepers' children in the elder age, and had spent 10,000 turnings enjoying the fruits of, and had just, at the very end, received in full measure back. "Record it," he told his own watch officers, echoing without knowing it the words of an old captain on a gray drum of a station at the edge of the fold. All of it. The Ossuar flight, the lights going out, the whole of it. If we are the generation that finally meets the thing our ancestors ran from, then let us at least be the generation that writes it down honestly. We spent 10,000 turnings unwriting the truth. It did not save us. The least we can do at the end is stop. Fleet Captain Senna Drusk crossed the fold 3 days after the Marshal released her, and she was not the same when she reached the light as when she had left the stratagem, because the crossing changed you, and everyone who crossed came out the far side knowing it. She had gone indisciplined. 20 turnings a score an officer does not shed itself in an afternoon, and she had told herself she would cross as a soldier crosses a border, upright, observant, giving nothing away. But the pull had grown the nearer she came, the note through the wall resolving toward words she could almost make out, and by the time her small craft reached the lip of the open fold, she was weeping the way the others wept, without shame, without knowing exactly why. Only that some part of her older than the Dominion and older than her rank and older than anything she had ever been taught to value had recognized the light and reached for it the way a hand reaches for a hand in the dark. She thought of the Marshal as she crossed. She thought of Vor Kale standing at his post with his colors up, one of the ones with no home across the fold, one of the ones the sleeper remembered instead of welcomed, and she understood the last cruelty of the thing the family had done, that it had cut the galaxy along a line that ran through loyalties, through friendships, through the trust of 20 turnings, so that a captain could be pulled home to the light while the man who had raised her had to stay behind and be forgotten. She had served Vor Kale for half her life. He had been the finest commander she had ever known, and the closest thing she had to a father in the arts of war. And she was going home to a family that had never met her while he stayed at his post to be unremembered. And there was nothing fair in it. Nothing fair at all. And she wept for that too. For the sheer unfairness of a justice so exact that it could tell the taken from the takers down to the blood, and did not care what bonds it cut to do it. And then the light took her, and the family met her, and it knew what she was grieving before she could shape it, and it spoke to her the way it spoke to all its returning children, from the inside, gently, one heart, very old. "We know," it said, "we know who you are leaving behind, we know you loved him. That is not held against you, cousin, it is the opposite of held against you. That you can love one of the taker's heirs and still come home to us is the proof of the thing we spent 10,000 years learning, that the war self is not the whole of anyone, not of us, not even of them. We did not wake to punish love. We woke because we had finally healed enough to be trusted with our own memory, and a people healed that far does not begrudge a daughter her grief for the man who taught her to stand. Grieve him, remember him, and know that he too is remembered because he stood, and the ones who stand we keep. You have not lost him to the dark the way the Asuar were lost. You have only lost him to the far side of a door. That is a smaller loss than it feels from where you are standing now. From where we are standing, 10,000 years long, it is hardly a loss at all." Senna Drusk crossed into the light, home to a family she had never met and had somehow always been, and she carried her grief with her the way the returning always did, and it did not lessen the homecoming, and the homecoming did not lessen the grief, and she understood, as the gold-white radiance closed gently around her small ship, that this was what it meant to be one of the taken and one of the loyal both at once, to go home weeping for the one you left standing at the door. The fold reached Vane's reach on the 9th day, and Oren Skell was awake to see it, because he was always awake now. It did not arrive the way he had braced for. He had braced in the deep unexamined way for a wall of fire, for the sky splitting, for the enemy at last. What came instead was the gold-white light, rising past the threshold, washing over the old beacon and swallowing it, not destroying it, swallowing it, the way dawn swallows a lamp. And then the fold itself, the gray nothing his ancestors had promised never to cross, simply was not there anymore, because the light was there instead, and the blank that had been blank for 10,000 turnings was open, and Skell's little gray drum of a station hung at the very lip of it, the last near-side structure. The final watchpost, looking straight into a place no one on his side had seen and lived to describe. He saw the worlds, close now, not blank at all. Worlds with the lights on, worlds green and blue and gold, worlds ringed with structures so vast and so calm that his instruments could not decide whether they were built or grown, and between the worlds and around them the shapes he had watched move in the deep, enormous, patient, unhurried, coming toward the open fold. And he saw the cousins going to meet them. For the cousins had reached the fold too from the near side, the ones whose blood had pulled them home, the Thren and the Scoran and the 100 peoples of the seed stock, arriving at the border in their own small ships and their emptied garrison craft and anything that would fly, gathering at the lip of the open fold in their thousands and then their millions, and crossing. That was the thing Skell had not been prepared for and would never forget. They crossed. They went into the gold-white light, into the place ships did not return from, and they did not vanish the way the Asuar had vanished. They did not go dark and silent and erased. They went in and the light took them gently and carried them inward toward the waking worlds. And on the channels, faintly, Skell's officers could hear them, the cousins, talking as they crossed, and they were not afraid. They were weeping, some of them. But they were not afraid. They sounded like people at the end of a long journey who have just seen, on the horizon, the shape of a house they had forgotten they remembered. Captain, Tesk at his side, his young frill flat, his voice very small. "I think, Captain, I think I feel it, the pull, I think I'm—" He stopped, ashamed. "I think I'm one of them, sir, a cousin. I think my blood is going home, and I've been trying not to tell you for 2 days." Oren Skell looked at the boy, and then he looked at the open fold, and at the cousins crossing into the light, and at the vast patient shapes coming home, and he made the last command decision of his 40-turning career, and it was the easiest one he had ever made. "Then go, Tesk," he said. "That's not desertion. There's no post left to desert. The thing we were set here to watch for has arrived, and it turns out it was never coming to destroy us, it was coming for its own, and you're its own. So go, cross the fold. Go home." He almost smiled, which he had not done in a very long time. "And when you get there, when you get to wherever the light is taking you, tell them there was an old soldier at the last watchpost who stood at his window for 40 turnings waiting for the enemy, and the enemy turned out to be a family coming to collect its children, and the old soldier was glad. Tell them the watches stood down. Tell them Vane's Reach kept its post to the very end and then opened its door. Can you remember that, boy?" "Yes, Captain," Tesk said, and his eyes were wet, and he saluted, throat frill up now, up for the first time since the whole thing began, and he went to the small craft, and he crossed the fold, and Oren Skell watched the light take him gently and carry him inward, one more voice among the millions going home. And then Skell was nearly alone on his station. Most of his crew had been cousins, he realized, watching them go, more than half. A border posting drew the seed stock without anyone ever knowing why, and he was one of the ones who stayed, one of the not kin, one of the ones who felt no pull and had no home across the fold to go to. He did not run. He had watched the Ossuar run. He stood at his window, at the lip of the open fold, in the gold-white light of the waking worlds, and he recorded, and he transmitted, and he waited to learn what the sleeper would do with an old soldier who had spent his whole life guarding a door he now understood he had never once been able to close. The Even did not feel the pull either, most of them, and it grieved them in a way it did not grieve the younger powers because the Even had been there. Not their heirs. Them. The oldest of the Even lineages had been present, as young and terrible powers in the elder age, and had done the things the sleeper had woken to remember. The Even were not the heirs of the takers. Some of them were the takers, still living, so old that the crime was 10 great ages behind them, and still, in the cold arithmetic of the sleeper's memory, theirs. Counselor Prime Veith convened the choir one last time, and she put to them the question that would decide how the oldest power in the galaxy met its reckoning. "We could run," she said. "The Ossuar ran. We are older and cleverer than the Ossuar, and we might run further. We could scatter into the deep dark and the far rim and spend what remains of us fleeing the memory we earned. Or we could stand where we are, as the Scoran Marshal stands, colors up, and wait to be judged, and hope the manner of our standing counts for something. Those are the 2 roads the younger powers have taken, and I have called you here to tell you that we will take neither, because we are not a younger power, and we do not get to hide behind our heirs, because we have no heirs. We are still here, we who did it, and that changes what is owed." "What is the 3rd road?" asked the eldest voice, the one that spoke through the burned walls. "The 3rd road is to open the fold ourselves." Veith let it land. "The sleeper is opening it regardless. The light is already past Vane's reach. The covenant is ended and cannot be unended. But there is a difference, a small difference, the only difference left to us between having the door torn from your hands and choosing to open it. The sleeper asked in its message for the fold to be opened. It could open the fold itself. It is opening the fold itself. It does not need us, but it asked. It asked the ones who took its children to be the ones who let them go. And I think I am old and I have been wrong before, but I think that the asking was the whole of the test. Not whether we would fight, because we cannot. Not whether we would run, because running only earns the Ossuar's fate. But whether we, the ones who took, would put our own hands on the door that has kept the family apart for 10,000 years and open it and give the children back freely at last. I think that is the only thing the sleeper ever wanted from us. Not our fear, not our fleets. Our hands on the door, opening it, saying, 'We are sorry, they were never ours, take them home.'" The choir was silent, the terrible even silence, and Veith waited, And at last the eldest voice spoke from the burned walls, the voice that had been there at the sealing of the covenant, the voice that had told her, when she was young, that there was nothing behind the fold they could not destroy, and that this was not why they feared it. I catalogued that world, the eldest voice said. In the elder age it was I. I stood in orbit above it, and I made the survey, and I gave the young loud people their designation, and I recommended the dredging. And I have carried that for 10 great ages, and I have spent every one of them making certain the galaxy would never speak the name of the thing I helped to wrong. I built the silence Veeth. I chose Tesserond. I chose the cousins to keep the name, because I knew they would fear it most, and I told myself it was mercy that I let them live at all. The walls seemed to sigh. Open the fold, with my hand on it. Let the last thing I do in this long life be the opposite of the first. I made the map that ended at their world. Let me be the one to redraw it. And so the Even, oldest of the great powers, the takers themselves, went to the fold with their own hands, and they did not muster and they did not flee, and they opened the border they had drawn 10,000 years ago, freely from their side, the givers back of what was never theirs. It was the only act of the whole long crisis that the sleeper had actually asked for, and it was performed by the guiltiest hands in the galaxy, and whether it earned them anything, no one yet knew. Sail Vune was summoned across the fold. The message came again on the sleeper's channel into the deep archive into her steady young hands, and it was for her by name her name, which the sleeper should not have known, which meant the sleeper had been listening to the keepers of its silence for longer and closer than any of them had dreamed. It said, "Come, cousin, come and see. You wanted to know why. Come across the fold and we will show you, because you are the one who found the name, and the one who found the name should be the one who carries it back." "You don't have to go," Andrek said, though he knew she would. "You've done enough. You answered it. You said the true thing. No one can ask more of a keeper than to finally tell the truth after 10,000 years of silence. You could stay. You could stay here with me, and we could," he stopped, because there was no end to that sentence that was not a lie. There was no here to stay in. The silence was over. The reticulum's whole reason had ended. They were not keepers anymore. They were just two people at the bottom of a house that no longer had a purpose. "I have to go, Master," Sail said gently. "You know I do. It's the last why. It's the biggest one. 10,000 years my whole order sat closest to the name and never once got to know what it belonged to. And now it's asking me to come and see. I'd rather cross that fold and find out and never come back than stand on this side wondering for the rest of my life. You taught me the silence. Let the sleeper teach me the reason for it. Someone from this house should finally know." Andrek looked at her for a long moment, his 6-fingered hand still at last, and something in his old face let go, the last of the fear, worn smooth at the end the way an edge is worn smooth. "When you get there," he said, "and when they show you why, because I think they will, I think that is the whole of it. I think the sleeper woke not to conquer but to explain, to finally be known by the children it lost. When they show you and you understand it, do one thing for an old keeper who spent his whole life guarding a name he was never allowed to know the meaning of." His voice cracked. "Remember it for me, whatever it is, however terrible or however kind. Carry it back if you can, and if you can't, then just know it on my behalf, so that somewhere in this galaxy there is one keeper of Tesserond who finally understood what we were keeping. That's all I ever wanted, girl, in 70 turnings of silence, just to know why." Sail embraced the old man, which was not a thing the keepers of the reticulum did, touch being an edge like any other. And then she went up the 7 stairs for the last time, and out of the cindermark, and she took a keeper's small craft, and she flew it across the emptying dark toward the fold, toward the gold-white light of the waking worlds, toward the reason at the bottom of the oldest silence in the galaxy, alone, 17 turnings old, the girl who wanted to know why, going at last to find out. Crossing the fold was not like crossing anything. Sail had expected a threshold, a moment, a line her craft would pass through with the near side behind her and the far side ahead. There was no line. There was only the gold-white light, thickening around the little craft until the dark was gone and the instruments went quiet and the craft itself seemed to slow and settle, held, the way a leaf is held on the surface of still water. She was not flying anymore. She was being carried. Something vast and gentle and entirely beyond her had taken the small ship in a grip she could not feel, and it drew her inward, past the threshold beacon that hung dead and swallowed in the glow, past the lip of the open fold, into the place that had been blank on every chart in the galaxy for 10,000 years. And she saw the worlds, and she understood the first thing, which was that the sleeper had never been asleep. The blank was not a wilderness, it was not a ruin. It was a garden that had been tended patiently in the dark, for 100 centuries, worlds beyond counting, green and blue and gold, and colors she had no name for, ringed and webbed and cradled in structures so vast, and so quiet that her mind kept trying to read them as landscape, as geology, as something natural, because nothing built could be that large and that still and that calm. There were more worlds behind the fold than the great powers held in all their territories together. There were more lights than the near galaxy had stars. For 10,000 turnings, while the powers congratulated themselves on containing the sleeper behind a line, the sleeper had been here. In the dark it had chosen, growing, tending, becoming. Not the young, loud, quarrelsome people the elder age had catalogued, but whatever that people becomes when it is given 10,000 years of quiet and the entire patience of the grave. The voice came to her then. It did not come through the channel or the instruments. It came the way the word had come, in the vault, under the lampblack, from inside, from the oldest place, from the part of her that had been made for this without her knowing. It was not one voice. It was not many. It was the sound a family makes when it speaks with one heart, and it was gentle, and it was very old, and it said, "Welcome home, cousin. You are the first of the kept to come and see. We are glad it was you. We have been listening to your house for 10,000 years, and of all the keepers who ever held our name, you are the only one who ever wanted to know what it meant instead of only wanting to keep it hidden. So we will tell you. You asked us why. Come and we will show you the why, because the why is the whole of it, and someone from the House of Silence should finally carry it." And they showed her. They did not show her with words. They showed her the way the very old show the very young. All at once, a knowing poured into her that she would spend the rest of her life unfolding. But the shape of it, the shape she carried out, was this. Long ago the giants of the elder age had come to a young world, and they had done what giants do, and the young people of that world had fought back, and they should have lost. By every arithmetic of that age, they should have lost in a season and been dredged and forgotten. But they had not lost. They had found in the extremity of that war that they were capable of a thing the giants were not a weapon, not a fleet, but a capacity, a way of becoming, a thing that woke in them only when they were pushed all the way to the edge of ending. When a human people is remembered as prey, the knowing told her, it becomes the thing that ends the memory of predators. Not because it is cruel, because it cannot stop. That is the shape of us at the bottom. Pushed far enough, we do not break and we do not flee. We answer, and we do not stop answering until there is nothing left to answer. And then we look up and find that we have unmade the giants of an age, and that we have become, in the unmaking, something we do not recognize and do not want to be and cannot easily put back down. That was the war the elder age had lost, not to a fleet, to a capacity it had woken by mistake, in a people it had thought too small to matter, and could not put back to sleep once it was woken. And here was the why, the thing at the bottom of the oldest silence, the reason Sail had crossed the fold to learn and would carry back to a dying old keeper at the bottom of a purposeless house. When the war was over and the giants were unmade, and the human people looked up from what they had become, they were afraid. Not of the galaxy, of themselves. They had felt the thing they turned into when they were remembered as prey. And they understood that as long as they were out in the galaxy, present, named, known, competing, there would always be another giant, another arithmetic, another power that looked at them and saw a reef to dredge. And every time the thing would wake, and every time it would not stop, and they would spend eternity unmaking the galaxy one giant at a time and becoming, over and over, the thing they could not bear to be. So they did the only thing that could stop it. They withdrew. They drew a line and they put themselves behind it, and they asked the galaxy for the one gift that could keep the thing asleep: forget us. Not to protect the galaxy from our fleets, the knowing told her, though you believed that, and we let you believe it. To protect the galaxy from what we become when you remember us as a thing to be conquered. The covenant was never a leash the galaxy held on us. It was a leash we begged the galaxy to help us hold on ourselves. We asked you to forget our name so that no one would ever again wake the thing at our bottom. We quarantined ourselves. We chose the blank on the map. 10,000 years of the dark, cousin, of tending our garden in the quiet was not a prison. It was a healing. It was a people learning, slowly, patiently, across 100 centuries, to be more than the thing it became at the edge of ending. To grow a patience large enough to hold the war self still without a galaxy's help. And it worked. Look around you. We are healed enough now to be trusted with our own memory. That is why we woke when you said our name. Not because being remembered released the weapon, because being remembered at last no longer had to. Sail wept, in the little craft in the gold-white light, because she understood, and it was the largest and saddest and most magnificent thing she had ever understood, and there was no one to tell it to but a channel that could not carry the weight of it and an old man across the fold who had waited 70 turnings for exactly this. And then, because she was the girl who wanted to know why, and the why was never only one thing, she asked the last question, the hard one, the one that had been sitting under her grief since the message first came. Then what about the others, she said aloud into the light. The ones who aren't cousins. The Aswar ran and their lights went out and no one saw it. The Ivan who opened the fold with their own hands, the marshal standing at his post with his colors up. You said you remember them too. If you healed, if you're more than the war self now, then what are you going to do to the ones who took your children? Because half the galaxy thinks you came home as a family and half of it thinks you came home as a reckoning. And I've seen enough now to know it's both. And I need to know how much of each, because I have to carry this back, and I won't carry a lie. The light was quiet for a long moment. And then the knowing came again, and it was gentler than before, and it was also underneath, the coldest thing she had yet felt, the war self not gone but held still, present but leashed, the thing they had spent 10,000 years learning to hold. We will do to them, the knowing said, exactly what they did to us, no more and no less. They took our name out of the galaxy's memory. They scraped it off the charts and washed it under lampblack and struck it from the mouths of children, and they set our own cousins to keep it forgot, and they called it mercy that they let us live at all. So, the ones who ran, the ones who knew the specifics of what they did and fled rather than face it, we have taken their names out of the galaxy's memory. That is all. We did not burn their fleets. We did not break their worlds. We unwrote them. One lane at a time, one holdfast at a time, we scraped the Aswar off the charts and washed them under the dark, and in 100 turnings no one in this galaxy will remember that the Aswar were ever a people, and there will be a blank in the map where they stood, and the young will draw it and not ask why, and if any scholar ever reconstructs a fragment of them and reads it aloud, some keeper will be sent to unmake it. We have given them the fold. We have made them the blank. It is the most exact justice there is, cousin, not to destroy the ones who tried to forget you, but to visit upon them precisely the forgetting they visited on you. They wanted us gone from memory. Now they will learn what it is to be the ones no one is allowed to remember. Sail sat with that in the light, and she understood that she was looking at the shape of the whole next age of the galaxy. The map redrawn. The old blank filled in, humanity restored, named, remembered, home. And new blanks opening where the takers had stood, the Aswar first and others to follow, the guilty unwritten one lineage at a time, becoming the folds the next 10,000 years would learn not to speak of. The galaxy's silence was not ending. It was only changing hands. And the ones who had spent an age keeping the human name forgotten would spend the next age as the forgotten, and there would still be a reticulum. There would always be a reticulum, because a galaxy always needs someone to hold the hand over the mouth of the thing it has agreed not to remember. Only now the thing behind the fold would be the takers, and the keepers would be keeping their silence, and humanity would be out in the light, home, remembered, healed, tending its garden, patient at last, holding its old war self still by its own strength, and no longer needing a galaxy's forgetting to do it. And the ones who stood, Sale said, the even who opened the fold themselves, the marshal who kept his post, you said the manner of standing counts, does it? Or is that just a story the doomed tell themselves? The manner of standing is the whole of it, the knowing said, and there was something in it now that was almost warm. We did not ask the takers to fight us because they could not. We did not ask them to flee, and the ones who fled we forgot. We asked one thing of the guilty at the very end. We asked them to put their own hands on the door and give our children back. The even did that. The eldest of them, the one who catalogued our world in the elder age and built your whole silence, he opened the fold with his own hand and named himself and did not run. So he will be remembered, not forgiven. There is no forgiving the elder age, and he would not want it, and we would not give it, but remembered. He will keep his name. That is what the manner of standing by's, cousin, not innocence, memory. The ones who faced us get to be remembered, even the guilty ones, even the ones who did the worst of it, because facing a thing is the opposite of forgetting it, and we are done forever with rewarding the forgetting. And the soldier at the last watchpost, the one who stood at his window for 40 turnings and then opened his door and sent his cousins home, and did not run though he had no home to run to, that one we will remember longest of all. Tell him, if you cross back. Tell the old soldier at Vane's Reach that the family saw how he stood, and that of all the ones who were not our blood, he stood the best, and he will be in the record we keep for as long as we endure, which is longer than the stars he watched by. On Tesserand, in the deep archive, Master Andrek watched the charts redraw themselves, and he understood that he was the last man of an order that had already ended and did not yet know how to stop. It happened all at once, across every record in the vault, across every sealed case and every hanging map and every stone tablet and every crystal plate. The same thing that had begun the night the ink refused to hold, but complete now, finished, arrived. The blank filled in. On chart after chart, the gray fold that had run across the third quadrant for 10,000 turnings dissolved, and where it had been there was no longer a scar or a wash of lampblack or a decorous nothing, but the thing itself, restored, the sector that had been struck from the galaxy's memory rising back into every map at once, worlds and lanes and structures, and at the center of it, in the old deep-cut glyphs that fit a keeper's mouth like a key, the name. Andrek stood among the changing charts and let himself, for the first time in 70 turnings, read it. There was no reason not to now. The silence was over. The thing the silence had guarded was home. He read the name that his whole order had existed to keep unread, the name he had been forbidden even to know the meaning of, and he found that Sale had been right, that it fit his mouth as though his mouth had been built around the shape of it, because it had been, because his people were the taken cousins, and this was the word for what they were before they were taken. He did not speak it aloud. He was too old to change the habit of a lifetime in an afternoon. But he shaped it, silently, the way his youngest keeper had shaped it in the dark, and he wept, an old man alone in a room full of maps that were finally telling the truth, because he had spent his entire life keeping a name forgotten, and he had just learned that the name was his own. And then the charts did the second thing, the thing that told Andrek the shape of the age to come, and it stopped his weeping cold. As the human sector rose back into the maps, filling in, remembered, a new blank began to open. Out at the far rim where the Ossuar had been, the charts started to gray over. Lanes he had known his whole life went dim. Worlds with names 10,000 turnings old faded under a wash that no hand had painted, the ink letting go of them the way it had once let go of the human name, in reverse. He watched the Aswar being unwritten in real time, watched a great power of the galaxy dissolve into a decorous nothing on every map at once, and he understood that in 100 turnings there would be a new gray fold across the far rim, and a new generation of keepers would draw it and not ask why, and somewhere a receiver would sit dark in a foundation waiting for a message that would take another 10,000 years to come. "It doesn't end," Andrek said to the empty archive, to the changing maps, to no one. "The silence doesn't end, it only moves. We kept the human name for 10,000 turnings, and now the humans will keep the Aswar name for the next 10,000, and there will always be a reticulum, and there will always be a fold, and there will always be a thing the galaxy has agreed not to remember." He laughed once, an old dry sound with no humor in it and something almost like peace underneath. "We thought we were guarding a secret. We were only ever tending a wound. And the wound is going to outlive every one of us and be tended by hands not yet born, and none of them will know why either until one of them some far-off day refuses to stop asking. The way she wouldn't stop asking. Sail, girl, I hope you found your why. I hope it was worth the crossing. I hope." He did not finish, because the sleeper's channel in the foundation lit, and a voice came down into the deep archive, and it was hers. At Vane's reach, the reckoning reached Oran Skell, and it was not what he had braced for, because nothing in this whole affair had been what anyone had braced for. He stood at his window at the lip of the open fold, alone but for a skeleton watch of the other not kin, the ones with no home across the light, and he waited for the end he had chosen to meet standing. He had watched Tesk cross. He had watched the millions cross. He had watched the vast patient shapes come home. And now the light was full upon his little station, gold-white and total, and the shapes were near enough that his swallowed instruments showed him, dimly, at the edge of comprehension, that they were looking back at him. That the thing coming home had noticed the old soldier at the last watchpost, and had turned some vast attention toward the gray drum of a station that had kept its post for 40 turnings. And Skell stood in that attention, the way a man stands in a wind off the deep sea, small, cold, and strangely unafraid, because he had made his choice, and there was a great clean quiet in having made it. The voice came to him. It came the way it had come to Sail, from the inside, from a place he had not known he had, and it did not judge him and it did not threaten him. It thanked him. "You kept the door," it said, the way a family speaks, one heart very old. 40 turnings you kept it, not knowing why, told only that you must not fire and must not flee and must die at your post, and you believed it was melodrama and you kept it anyway. And when the day came and you learned at last what you had been guarding against, you did not run, though you had no blood among us and no home to run to. You stood. And you opened your door and sent our children through it and told the boy to tell us how you stood. He told us. We heard. So hear this, old soldier, from the ones your ancestors ran from. You are not one of the takers. Your hands are clean of the elder age. And the manner of your standing has bought you the thing we give only to the ones who face us. You will be remembered. Your name will be in our record for as long as we endure. Not the Aswar's fate, not the gray of the unwritten. You watched an empty border for 40 turnings and never once looked away, and the family you were watching for has come home, and it saw you, and it will not forget the watchman. Stand down, Oran Skell. The watch is over. You kept it well. And Oran Skell, 40 turnings a watchman at the edge of the forbidden dark, the man who had recited 3 rules he did not believe and lived to learn that every one of them was mercy, stood at his window in the gold-white light, and did the last thing his post required, which was nothing at all. He simply stood, and was seen, and was remembered, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the whole of what a small life set beside a vast one could ever hope to be. Enough to be seen. Enough to be remembered by the thing you spent your life afraid of. He had thought, for 40 turnings, that the best a watchman could hope for was to see nothing and grow old. He had been wrong. The best a watchman could hope for was this, to see, at the very end, the true size of the thing he guarded, and to be found standing when it looked back. High Marshal Vorkale kept his post too, with his diminished fleet and his colors up, at the muster that was no longer a muster because half of it had gone home. He had sent Senna Drusk across the fold with the last order he would ever give her, and he had watched her small ship go into the light with the cousins, and he had turned back to the work of standing well, which was the only work he had left. The judgment reached him as it reached all the remembered, the takers and the heirs of takers who had not run, and Vorkale, who was too young to have done the Elder Age's crimes but old enough in blood to answer for them, learned the shape of his people's future in the same moment the whole not-kin galaxy learned it. They were not to be destroyed. There would be no fleet breaking, no world burning, no fire. That was not the shape of the sleeper's justice. The sleeper had healed too far from its war self to want the fire, and its justice was colder and more exact than fire ever was. The heirs of the takers would simply, slowly, over the age to come, be forgotten, not annihilated, unremembered. The great powers that had risen on the bones of the Elder Age's crimes would find their names growing dim in the galaxy's records, their deeds uncited, their lineages unremarked, their worlds fading from the maps one lane at a time, until in 10,000 turnings the young would draw a gray fold across the places where the Scoran and the rest had stood and not ask why, and there would be a new blank, and a new silence, and a new order to keep it. But not all of them at the same rate. That was the mercy inside the justice, the thing Vorkale understood as the cold knowing settled into him. The ones who had run the Ossuar were being unwritten fast, erased within a season, struck from the maps in real time. The ones who had stood, colors up, and faced the thing their ancestors had wronged, they would fade slower, and some of them, the ones who had stood best, might not fade at all, might be kept in the record as the taker's heirs who at least had the spine to meet the reckoning instead of fleeing it. The manner of standing bought the rate of forgetting. It was the most exact justice Vorkale had ever encountered, and he was a marshal. He had spent his life administering justice, and he had never once managed anything so precise or so terrible or so fair. "Record it," he told his watch officers one last time, standing at his post with the gold-white light on his bone-colored fleet, echoing an old captain he would never meet on a gray drum of a station he would never see. All of it. Honestly, we are the generation that met the thing our ancestors ran from, and we did not run, and if the price of that is that we fade slower than the cowards, then let the record show we earned the extra time on our feet. My ancestors took a people's children and set their cousins to keep the crime forgotten. I cannot undo it, but I can stand here, colors up, and be forgotten honestly in the open, facing the ones we wronged, instead of dark and screaming in the deep like the Ossuar. That is the only victory left to the guilty, not to escape the reckoning, to meet it standing. He looked at the light, at the shapes coming home, at the whole vast patient magnificence of the thing his people had spent 10,000 turnings congratulating themselves on containing. "We never contained them," he said quietly to no one, to the record, to the age to come. "There was never a line strong enough to contain them. There was only a family being patient, and we mistook their patience for our strength, and we called the mistake a covenant, and we taught it to our children as law. Record that too. Let the last true thing the Scoran ever say be that we finally understood the size of what we were spared." Sale's voice came down the sleeper's channel into the deep archive, and Andrek sat down on the cold floor to hear it, because his legs would not hold him. "Master, it's me. I'm across. I don't have the words for where I am, but I'm safe, and they let me use the channel, and I have to tell you before anything else happens because you asked me to, and it's the only thing I've ever been able to give you." Her voice was steady the way a voice is steady when the person has cried all the way through and come out the far side. "I know why now. I know the whole why. And I'm going to tell it to you, all of it, so that there's one keeper of Tesserand who dies knowing what we were keeping. Are you there? Master, are you listening?" "I am here," Andrek said, though she could not hear him, though the channel only ran the one way for him, an old man talking back to a voice that could not receive him. "I am listening, girl. I have been listening my whole life. Tell me." Tell me why." And she told him. She told him about the garden in the dark, the 100 centuries of worlds tended in the quiet. She told him about the war in the Elder Age and the thing that woke in a young people pushed to the edge of ending, the capacity, the not stopping, the way a people remembered as prey becomes the end of the memory of predators. She told him the great secret at the bottom of the oldest silence, that the Covenant had never been a leash the galaxy held on the sleeper, but a leash the sleeper had begged the galaxy to help it hold on itself, that the blank on the map had not been a prison but a healing, that 10,000 turnings of the dark had been a people learning, patiently, across 100 centuries, to be more than the thing it became at the edge of ending, so that one day it could be trusted with its own memory again. She told him that the keepers of Tesserand had not been jailers and had not been fools. They had been the cousins the family left behind, set to hold the door, and every keeper who ever held the silence had been, without knowing it, helping a wounded people heal, one forgotten year at a time. "We were part of it, Master," she said. "That's the thing I need you to hear. We weren't outside it. We weren't the galaxy's dupes and we weren't the sleeper's guards. We were family, doing the one thing family could do from the wrong side of a door, keeping the quiet so the ones inside could get well. 70 turnings you kept that silence. You weren't wasting your life on a dead world guarding an empty secret. You were sitting up with the wounded. You were keeping watch outside the room while your own people learned how to live again. That's what the reticulum was. That's what you were. Not a jailer. A cousin who kept the vigil. And they know it, Master. They told me. They said the keepers were the ones who kept faith longest, and they meant it as the highest thing they could say." Andrek sat on the cold floor of the deep archive, 70 turnings a keeper of a silence he had never understood, and he wept. And this time there was no fear left in it at all, only the enormous, unbearable relief of a man who has learned, at the very end, that his life had meant the opposite of what he had feared it meant. He had thought he had spent himself holding a hand over a sleeper's mouth. He had spent himself keeping a vigil at a healing. He had thought he was a small gray man on a useless world. He had been family, keeping faith, for 70 turnings, longer than almost anyone. "Thank you," he said, to the channel that could not carry it back to her, to the maps redrawing themselves around him, to the name rising into every chart at once. "Thank you, girl. That's all I wanted, just to know. I can stop now. I can finally stop." And an old keeper of Tesserand let go of a weight he had carried for 70 turnings, there on the floor of the House of Silence, with the truth in his ears at last. And it was the gentlest thing that had happened to him in his whole, long, careful life. Sail did not cross back. She thought about it, she thought about the little craft, and the near side, and Andrek alone in the archive, but the family had shown her the last thing, the thing that decided her, and it was this. The galaxy needed someone to carry the name back who understood what it meant. Not the great powers, they understood only that they had been spared. Not the scholars who had read the word aloud by accident. They did not know what they had said. Someone from the House of Silence, who had crossed the fold and learned the whole why and come back to teach it, so that this time the remembering would be done correctly, so that the human name would rise into the galaxy's charts not as a terror to be managed, but as a truth to be known. So that 10,000 years of forgetting would end not in ignorance, but in understanding. "They want me to be the first," she told Andrek on the channel before the end. "The first keeper of the new remembering. That's what the reticulum is for now, Master. Not to keep the human name forgotten, that's over, that's finished, the name is home. To keep it remembered, correctly. To make sure the galaxy never again forgets who the people behind the fold are, or why the line was drawn, or what it cost. There's going to be a new silence out at the rim, where the takers are being unwritten, and someone will keep that, the way we kept the old one, cousins holding the door. But there's also going to be a remembering, and someone has to be the keeper of that. Someone has to carry the true name back across the fold and put it in the mouths of children the right way this time, so it's never again a thing that has to be scraped off a map in the dark. They asked me to be that one, because I'm the one who found the name, Because I'm the one who wanted to know why. Her voice caught. I said, yes, Master, I'm coming back across. Not to the archive, to the galaxy, to all of it, to teach the name. I wanted to know why my whole life. And now I do. And the only thing worth doing with a why like this one is to make sure no one ever has to not know it again. She crossed back through the gold-white light, and the family carried her small craft to the lip of the open fold and set it down gently on the near side, at Vane's reach, where an old soldier still stood at his window, and Sale and Oran Skell met, the youngest keeper of the new remembering and the oldest watchman of the last watch, the girl who had crossed the fold and come back and the man who had kept the door until it opened. They did not say much. There was not much that needed saying, between two people who had each, in their own way, stood at the edge of the forbidden dark and been seen by the thing inside it and lived. But Skell told her what the family had told him, that he would be remembered, that the manner of his standing had bought him a place in the record for as long as the sleeper endured. And Sale told him it was true, that she had heard them say it herself, that the old soldier at the last watchpost was the one they said they would remember longest of all the ones who were not their blood. And then Sale Vune began her work, which was the work of the age to come, and which would outlast her by 10,000 turnings the way the old silence had outlasted its founders. She carried the name back into the galaxy. She taught it to the great powers who had been spared, so they would understand what they had been spared from and why. To the cousins who had not gone home, the ones whose blood ran too thin for the pull but who had a right to know their own origin. To the young, most of all, to the children, in the plain true grammar of a thing that should never have been hidden, so that the next generation would grow up knowing the name that their grandparents' whole civilization had labored to keep them from ever speaking. The charts of the galaxy were redrawn. Not by the reticulum this time, by the family, from behind the fold, and by Sale and the keepers who followed her, from the near side, the two of them meeting in the middle, the way the sleeper's channel had always held both halves of a conversation waiting for someone to begin it. The gray fold that had run across the third quadrant for 10,000 turnings was gone, and in its place was the human sector, restored, named, remembered, its worlds and its lanes and its patient tended garden drawn true on every map. And out at the rim, where the takers had been, new gray folds were opening, and new keepers were being chosen, cousins, always cousins, the ones who would fear the silence most because they were nearest of kin to the ones it hid, to hold the door on the next long forgetting. The wound had moved, as Andrek had understood it would, but the healing had moved too. And that, Sale came to believe, was the truest thing the family had taught her, that a galaxy is always tending some wound, always keeping some silence, always holding some door, and that the only choice that had ever mattered was whether you kept your silence in ignorance or in understanding, whether you held your door as a jailer or as family keeping faith outside a healing. Master Andrek died on Tesseron before the first snow of the new season, in the deep archive, among the charts that had finally told the truth, an old keeper who had learned at the very end that his life had meant the opposite of what he feared. They found him with a chart across his knees, the oldest one, the Thren Survey 900 turnings dead, the one whose ink had refused to hold, and the human name stood clear on it now, restored, no longer a ghost under lampblack, and Andrek's six-fingered hand rested on it, and his old flat face was at peace. Sale kept that chart. She kept it her whole life. It was the first thing she showed the children, when she taught them the name, the map where the silence had first cracked, where an ink had once refused to lie, where a girl who wanted to know why had bent close to a 900-turning survey and seen, under the wash of 100 centuries, the shape of a word that fit her mouth like a key. And on the day she was very old herself, older than Andrek had been, the last living keeper who had crossed the fold and come back, Sale Vune stood before a hall of the young, cousins and great power children and the scattered blood of 100 worlds, all of them born into a galaxy that remembered, none of them ever having known a silence, And she taught them the name one final time, the way she had taught it 10,000 times, the way it would be taught after her for as long as the galaxy endured. She told them it had been struck from every chart. She told them a whole civilization had spent 100 centuries making certain no tongue could ever shape it. She told them the strongest worlds had trembled at the thought of it, and mustered every fleet they had at a border they had sworn never to cross, and braced for a war that never came as fire, because the thing behind the fold had healed too far to want the fire. She told them it was not a weapon, and not a monster, and not a myth. It was a family, and it had gone into the dark to get well, and it had asked only to be forgotten until it was ready to be remembered, and the galaxy had kept that vigil for 10,000 turnings without ever knowing what it kept. And then she said the name aloud, the way she said it every time, freely, plainly in the open, in the grammar of a thing that should never have been hidden. The name a whole galaxy had agreed to forget so that its owner could sleep, the name that had risen back into every chart of its own accord, the name that fit a keeper's mouth like the oldest word the body knows, because it was. Human, said ScienceFiction to the listening young. The people behind the fold were human, and the world they came from, the world the elder age went to dredge and did not come back from, the world that was struck from every map and is drawn true on all of them now, the world was called Earth. Say it, both of them. Say them out loud, all of you, the way your grandparents' whole civilization spent 10,000 years making certain you never could. Human, Earth. There. Now you have said the two most forbidden words the galaxy ever held, and nothing has ended, and no fleet has come, and the sky has not fallen, because that was never what those words were for. They were only ever the name of a family that went away to heal and came home and asked at the last one single thing of the galaxy that had wronged its children. She looked out at the young faces, at the age she had built, at the remembering that would outlast her. Not that we fear them, not that we forget them, only that we never make them a secret again. So do not keep this quiet. Do not scrape it off your charts. Do not wash it under lampblack for the next frightened age to find. Say the name. Teach it to your own children. Keep it in the light. Because a galaxy that remembers Earth is a galaxy that never has to be afraid of it, and that, in the end, was the only covenant that ever mattered.